Our old government broke apart after not even 3 years. That's why we had elections earlier this year. And now social media is full of videos claiming we'll have new elections any day now because Chancellor Merz is finished and about to resign. If our governments keep collapsing faster and faster, what does that mean for the future of Germany? Could we be heading into a new election soon again? Because remember, Merz barely won the vote as Chancellor only in the second round because the Bundestag was divided from day one. And now 74% of his own party say they don't want him as Chancellor anymore. So let's look at his first 200 days in office, separate fact from fake, see what he promised and what actually happened, and why one of his recent comments about EU expats caused his biggest controversy yet. When Chancellor Merz took office, he announced nothing less than a Politikwechsel, a political turning point with the goal of making Germany fit for the future through reforms and investment. He placed a strong focus on the economy, aiming for at least 2% annual economic growth and prosperity for everyone. His government introduced a national program to cut bureaucracy and to simplify approval procedures for people and businesses. Major social reforms were also announced for pensions and healthcare with the idea of keeping the welfare state both sustainable and fair. And in defense, Merz set the ambition to make the Bundeswehr the strongest conventional army in Europe, almost doubling the NATO target with 3.5% of GDP. Before we look at how supporters and critics judge his reforms, if you want to understand how these political changes affect your taxes, healthcare, pension and investments, join our live webinar on November 18 or book a free meeting with us. Both links are in the comments right below this video. Supporters say this marks a long-needed shift after years of stagnation. They praise early steps to cut bureaucracy, such as the plan to repeal the Supply Chain Act. On the international stage, allies describe Merz as decisive and reliable. He quickly built relationships with Trump and Zelensky. Union figures like Jens Spahn declared, "Germany is back." And the Chancellor himself insists that the autumn of reforms has already begun, but asks us for patience. Critics, however, call many of these promises unfulfilled or even broken pledges. Polls show that around 60% of Germans are dissatisfied with this government's work after 100 days. And economists are also skeptical. In an IFO survey, only 14% rated his economic policy positive. They criticized the lack of structural reforms, arguing that measures like tax breaks for overtime may win votes, but it doesn't fix deeper issues. Some opposition politicians even joke that the promised autumn of reforms has turned into a Herbst der Versäumnisse, an autumn of missed chances. And the biggest and most expensive reform we have to look at is the 500 billion euro Sondervermögen, a special fund that changed Germany's entire fiscal strategy. Before the election, Friedrich Merz had promised no new debt and repeatedly rejected any reform of the Schuldenbremse, Germany's constitutional debt brake. But during coalition talks with the SPD after early elections, he made a U-turn and agreed to create this debt-financed fund. The government describes it as a historic booster to modernize the country, a one-time investment program to fix Germany's aging infrastructure and restore competitiveness. Merz justified the new borrowing by saying debt is acceptable only if it increases the long-term value and performance of the economy, and that future growth would make these loans sustainable. Supporters call it a historic necessity, Germany's largest investment program ever, finally tackling the massive backlog in roads, railways, schools, and digital infrastructure. Economists at DIW Berlin estimate the package could lift Germany's economic output by about 2% per year over the next decade, calling it a Befreiungsschlag, a breakout for the struggling German economy. They argued that decades of underinvestment made such a fund inevitable, and that the debt is justified if it strengthens competitiveness. Critics, however, call the Sondervermögen a breach of trust and a shadow budget. The Association of Taxpayers labels it Sonderschulden, special debt disguised as a fund. And analysts from IB Köln argue that only about half of the money goes into new projects, while the rest replaces existing spending or covers consumption-related costs. They point out examples where transport subsidies were shifted out of the core budget and into the fund, meaning the official investment rate in the federal budget actually fell from 12% to 10% in 2025. Now, to really understand why Merz governs the way he does, we need to look at his story, and it's a pretty unusual one. Friedrich Merz first made headlines in the 1990s with his idea of the tax return on a beer mat, a symbol for his call to radically simplify Germany's tax system. After losing influence within the CDU to Angela Merkel in the early 2000s, he left parliament in 2009 and switched to the private sector. For more than a decade, Merz worked as a corporate lawyer and served on several major boards, including BlackRock Germany and HSBC, earning millions and becoming one of Germany's wealthiest politicians. He resigned from these positions in 2020 before returning to politics, eventually winning the CDU leadership in 2022 and becoming Chancellor in 2025. Supporters say this mix of business and politics makes him exactly the kind of leader Germany needs, someone who understands both the market and the government. They describe him as hands-on with real economic expertise, not just another career politician. And his comeback after years outside politics is often called the political comeback of the century. Critics say that this very background makes him too close to corporate interests. They call him a lobbyist and question his independence after years at BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager. Some argue that moving from maximizing profits to serving the public good may not happen overnight. Others add that because he had little government experience, he often relies on sharp, populist language that divides rather than unites. Remarks such as calling young migrants kleine Paschas have already caused major backlash. But his latest controversy about what he said regarding expats would become his biggest yet. On October 14, during a press conference, Chancellor Merz was asked about the rise of the AfD. He said that migration numbers were already down 60% compared to a year earlier and added, "We still see this problem in the cityscape, and that's why the Interior Minister is enabling and carrying out mass-scale deportations." When journalists later asked him to clarify and apologize, Merz said, "If you have daughters, ask them what I meant," referring to security issues in the cities, especially after dusk. After growing criticism, he explained a few days later that he was referring to migrants without resident status or jobs who break the rules, not expats like you who live and work here legally. He also said that Germany depends on immigration into the labor market and cannot function without expats, regardless of skin color. Supporters say Merz is simply saying out loud what many people think. They call him a realist who talks about issues most politicians avoid, and that's why most people trust him. A ZDF Politbarometer found that 63% of respondents agreed with his clarified statement. Even mayors like Boris Palmer from Tübingen, who is politically on the other side, publicly backed him, arguing that Merz was describing visible problems caused by small groups of young men without legal status, not attacking all foreigners. Critics say that his words were vague and dangerous. They accuse him of blurring the line between security policy and ethnicity, suggesting that one can see who belongs and who doesn't. Berlin's mayor Kai Wegner from Merz's own party distanced himself, stressing that Berlin is a diverse and open city where problems like violence or poverty can't be explained by nationality alone. Many journalists and opposition figures argue that Merz's phrasing fuels fear and distractions from deeper social issues, like integration. Whether you see Merz as a straight-talking realist or as a divider, one thing is clear. His first 200 days have sparked more debate than many chancellors before him. So, are new elections in Germany really coming? The truth is, even though some of these videos we showed you in the beginning reached tens of thousands of views, they're all fake. Germany's constitutional court can't even call new elections. Merz would have to resign himself, just like Olaf Scholz before. But it's not absurd to ask the question, because Merz's position is far from secure. And that uncertainty alone sums up German politics right now. In my opinion, it's too early to judge whether his government is succeeding and too soon to decide if Germany really needs new elections. He should get more time to prove himself and to show whether his tough tone can lead to real change. But what do you think? Should Germany give him more time, or is it already time for a new election? Tell me in the comments, I'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you for watching und bis zum nächsten Mal.